I'd like to talk a little bit this morning about what happens if we move from design to design thinking. Now, design thinking begins with what Roger Martin, the business school professor at the University of Toronto, calls integrative thinking. And that's the ability to exploit opposing ideas and opposing constraints to create new solutions. In the case of design, that means balancing desirability, what humans need, with technical feasibility and economic viability. But I do think that perhaps design is getting big again. And that's happening through the application of design thinking to new kinds of problems, to global warming, to education, healthcare, security, clean water. And as we see this reemergence of design thinking and we see it beginning to tackle new kinds of problems, there are some basic ideas that I think we can observe that are useful. And I'd like to talk about some of those just for the next few minutes. The first of those is that design is human-centered. It may integrate technology and economics, but it starts with what humans need, or might need. What makes life easier, more enjoyable? What makes technology useful and usable? But that's more than simply good ergonomics, putting the buttons in the right place. It's often about understanding culture and context before we even know where to start to have ideas. So when a team was working on a new vision screening program in India, they wanted to understand what the aspirations and motivations were of these school children to understand how they might play a role in screening their parents. Instead of starting with technology, the team started with people and culture. So if human need is the place to start, then design thinking rapidly moves on to learning by making. Instead of thinking about what to build, building in order to think. Now, prototypes speed up the process of innovation, because it's only when we put our ideas out into the world that we really start to understand their strengths and weaknesses. And the faster we do that, the faster our ideas evolve. Now, much has been said and written about the Aravind Eye Institute in Madurai, India. They do an incredible job of serving very poor patients. When I visited them a few years ago, what really impressed me was their willingness to prototype their ideas very early. This is the manufacturing facility for one of their biggest cost breakthroughs. And I think it's partly their prototyping mentality that really allowed them to achieve the breakthrough, because they brought the cost down from $200 a pair down to just $4 a pair. Partly they did this by, instead of building a fancy new factory, they used the basement of one of their hospitals. So if human need is the place to start and prototyping a vehicle for progress, then there are also some questions to ask about the destination. Instead of seeing its primary objective as consumption, design thinking is beginning to explore the potential of participation. The shift from a passive relationship between consumer and producer to the active engagement of everyone in experiences that are meaningful, productive, and profitable. Hilary Cottam, Charlie Ledbetter, and Hugo Manasai of Participor, they are suggesting a framework for reinventing the welfare state. So in one of their projects called Southwark Circle, they worked with residents in Southwark, South London, and a small team of designers to develop a new membership organization to help the elderly with household tasks. We can take this idea of participation perhaps to its logical conclusion and say that design may have its greatest impact when it's taken out of the hands of designers and put into the hands of everyone. Nurses and practitioners at US healthcare system Kaiser Permanente studied the topic of improving the patient experience, particularly focused on the way that they exchange knowledge and change shift. Through a program of observational research, brainstorming new solutions, and rapid prototyping, they developed a completely new way to change shift. They went from retreating to the nurses' station to discuss the various states and needs of patients to developing a system that happened on the ward in front of patients using a simple software tool. By doing this, they brought the time that they were away from patients down from 40 minutes to 12 minutes on average. They increased patient confidence and nurse happiness. So these are just some of the kind of basic ideas around design thinking and some of the kinds of new kinds of projects that they're being applied to. So why design thinking? Because it gives us a new way of tackling problems. Instead of defaulting to our normal convergent approach, where we make the best choice out of available alternatives, it encourages us to take a divergent approach, to explore new alternatives, new solutions, new ideas that have not existed before. But before we go through that process of divergence, there's actually quite an important first step. And that's, what is the question that we're trying to answer? What's the design brief? Now, but what are the kinds of questions that we might ask today? So these are some that we've been asked to think about recently. And one in particular is one that we're working on with the Acumen Fund in a project that's been funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. How might we improve access to safe drinking water for the world's poorest people, and at the same time stimulate innovation amongst local water providers? So instead of having a bunch of American designers come up with new ideas that may or may not have been appropriate, we took a sort of a more open, collaborative, and participative approach. We teamed designers and investment experts up with 11 water organizations across India. And through workshops, they developed innovative new products, services, and business models. We hosted a competition and then funded 5 of those organizations to develop their ideas. Some of those ideas are just getting launched into the market, and the same process is just getting underway with NGOs in East Africa. So for me, this project shows kind of how far we can go from some of those sort of small things that I was working on at the beginning of my career. That by focusing on the needs of humans, by using prototypes to move ideas along quickly, by getting the process out of the hands of designers, and getting the active participation of the community, we can tackle bigger and more interesting questions. And just like Brunel, by focusing on systems, we can have a bigger impact. So, I'd like to believe that design thinking actually can make a difference, that it can help create new ideas and new innovations beyond the latest high street products. To do that, I think we have to take a more expansive view of design, more like Brunel, less a domain of a professional priesthood. And the first step is to start asking the right questions. Thank you very much.